Oh. I'd like to call the meeting of the City of Bloomington Township to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Trustee Kearns,
Here.
Trustee Bolin,
Here.
Trustee Motney,
Here.
Trustee Dannenberger,
Here.
Trustee Becker,
Here.
Trustee Hendricks,
Here.
Trustee Ward,
Here.
Trustee Lee,
Here.
Trustee Crumpler.
Here.
Okay, can I have a motion and a second to allow the mayor to participate in the meeting remotely due to medical reasons?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by trustee,
Hendricks and seconded by Trustee Crumpler.
trustee Hendricks, second by trustee Crumpler. Please
Great.
call the roll.
Trustee Kearns,
Yes.
Trustee Bolin,
Yes.
Trustee Motney,
Yes.
Trustee Dannenberger,
Yes.
Trustee Becker,
Yes.
Trustee Hendricks,
Yes.
Trustee Ward,
Aye.
Trustee Lee,
Yes.
Trustee Crumpler.
Yes.
Trustee Milawamwe, are you there?
Yes, I am. Actually, I was waiting for a signal, but okay, well, thank you all very much. Do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
We received no emailed public comment, nor do we have anyone registered to speak.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by trustee Bolin. Is there a
Second.
Okay, second by trustee Hendricks, I think.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All of you look like tiny on my screen here, so it's hard for me to tell who's speaking. Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Kearns,
Yes.
Trustee Bolin,
Yes.
Trustee Motney,
Yes.
Trustee Dannenberger,
Yes.
Trustee Becker,
Yes.
Trustee Hendricks.
Yes.
Trustee Ward.
Aye.
Trustee Lee,
Yes.
Trustee Crumpler,
Yes.
Trustee Milawamwe.
Yes. Okay, the consent agenda passes with no nays to announce. Next item is a report by elected officials, and since we have no regular agenda, I should mention that, we're going to start with Township Supervisor Skillroot.
Good evening. There's one thing that I do want to get in the minutes. So it's in your supervisor's report that the guidelines for DHS, Department of Human Services, TANF guidelines, which are temporary assistance for needy families, have increased. We expect that every year to happen around this time. We're going to put that into effect. The increase is $425 from our $345. So I can't remember. That is a significant increase. But we have to do it. All townships that follow the General Assistance Handbook or training manual, there are written requirements based on lawsuits that had happened in the past that we have those written guidelines. So we are adopting that beginning January, whatever the first day of January, that's a Monday, 4th, I believe, January 4th. Can you verify that for sure? So do you have any questions about that? I'm not changing any guidelines for emergency assistance because our numbers were a little higher to accommodate the working poor individuals and their income guidelines. So we're keeping it the same as it was before.
Can you just, for everyone's information, clarify what the TANF grants can be used for?
TANF is the cash assistance program that Department of Human Services provides. And that is usually mostly. Yeah, it is. You have to have children to be on it. But any it's what's called other government assistance. It's basically any cash assistance that comes from the Department of Human Services, we cannot duplicate. So we don't overlap their services in any way. So if they have and are eligible for TANF, they don't receive assistance from Township. So we're staying at the same level that they are for a one person.
Other questions for Township Supervisor Skirwood? And if you could please maybe announce yourself, because I can't see who is asking questions.
One more thing. Happy holidays to everybody. I know we're doing this meeting ahead of time, so.
Are there any other questions? Okay, it doesn't sound like it, so we're going to move on to Township Assessor Steve Skirwood.
Scudder.
Scott, sorry. Sorry. I don't know if I promoted you or
The Board of Review timeline to file a complaint ended. We have received 383 complaints this year. It's a little higher than last year. It's starting to trickle up. I think the year over year of growth or increase of value, people are starting to question, but what the housing market is the housing market. So when it starts deteriorating, we do use a 3-year average. So if the government restrictions that were put in place earlier this year start to slow that process down, maybe we see lower assessment values in the future. But until then, we just monitor the 3-year average. Any questions?
I was curious. Yeah, I noticed, I like the bar graph, by the way. From 2002 to, 2022 to 2023, the number of appeals was up well, not significantly, but, obviously. I wonder, do you have any idea how many of those are decided in the property owner's favor?
Speaking from just past
in general,
experience, they're not increased at the board review typically.
Okay.
Most of the time there is some sort of reduction. We do everything on a mass appraisal scale. So when we're making adjustments, it's to several properties at the same time at the same rate. So there's going to be differences in that. Typically the people that get out of line and get too high are the ones that would complain. The ones we lose track of is the ones that get a little low and are selling their houses for more than what we have them assessed. Those are what we're trying to catch also. Those are the people that don't complain as much. So
Sure.
when they start getting caught up, then we start having complaints about that. So the equalization over the past few years has been pretty intense with the prices going higher than the assessments. So we've equalized individual areas with a lot more scrutiny. So that's why the increase maybe this year compared to last year started trickling up, because we had to start tightening up that those people that were too low had to get up to where everybody else. So when the county does something, we all go at the same rate. So that's probably why there's an increase. There was probably a few dippers that were a little low, and then they got a large adjustment to get back up to the market. And it's shocking, but I mean, when you catch them, you move them up and you just try to do your best. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
are there other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay, thank you, Donna. So seeing no other questions, then we are going to move to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion by trustee Bolin. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by trustee Dannenberger, I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Only two said aye that I could hear.
They're all there.
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, we're adjourned, so we'll see you in about 18 minutes.
Testing, testing.
I don't know what their plan is. Got it back open now.
I've never been like that.
Yeah, we just got it back, open. Yeah, it's been up for sale. We'll start out at 2:30. But I don't know what they're gonna do. Yes, there is. Down the basement. So they pulled the library.
Well, yeah, there's some.
Like they own stuff. But anyway, turn me on. I'm like, oh, wait. You know.
All the above.
But Kevin, well. Actually, I can try to. No, I think not. You're projecting it. Yeah. Push. Great to have that around, so it's very important. I can just. And then. Yeah. It's on. And I have to excuse myself. Claims, brochure.
Perfect. Good evening. If anybody is here to speak for public comment and hasn't registered yet, if you could please come forward. Thanks.
Oh, no, I've spoken quite frequently. I know, I know.
Over there, so that just gives them all more.
Oh, I don't know.
That's on me.
Mayor, just testing that you're online and can hear us.
I can hear you.
Yes, I am.
Thanks. And was that Jeff also?
Yes.
Thank you.
Am I good to go? I'm going to call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and stay standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Kearns,
Present.
Councilmember Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Motney,
Here.
Councilmember Dannenberger,
Present.
Councilmember Becker,
Here.
Councilmember Hendricks,
Here.
Councilmember Ward,
Here.
Councilmember Lee,
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to allow the mayor to participate in the meeting remotely due to medical reasons.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Councilmember Hendricks. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Becker.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kearns,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Dannenberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hendricks.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward. Aye. Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, Mayor, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you all very much for allowing me to participate remotely. And I think at this point, we're gonna move on to item number 5, which is recognition and appointments, Madam Clerk.
We'd like to recognize Patrick Hoban and his appointment to the Tri-County River Valley Development. And I believe Patrick is present. Thank you. And we'd like to recognize Eldon Hobbs to the appointment to the Citizens Beautification Committee. And Eldon, are you present? All right, I don't believe present. Congratulations and thank you for your service.
Yep. And I would echo that. Thank you very much, Eldon and Patrick. And Patrick, I know you were there. So again, want to thank you for your willingness to serve. Realize how busy you are, but again, you've agreed to take this on. So really appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is a public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do. We have 10 registered to speak in person, and we did receive emailed public comment, which was provided to council earlier today. That was sent by Carl Gecky. First up, after you read your statement, Mayor, will be Gary Lambert, and then to follow Christina Barnett.
Good, sounds good. And Madam Clerk, I'm gonna have to ask you to assist me because I cannot see much of the screen, so everything is pretty small. So if you could assist me in terms of managing traffic, that'd be helpful. A public comment is an opportunity for speakers to provide their views and feedback to the City Council. It is also an opportunity for the City Council to listen and hear diverse points of view. To maximize the impact of public comment and show respect for the expression of all views, speakers should maintain civility and focus on city issues. Speakers must identify themselves for the record, but are not required to give their address. Each speaker is given the floor for 3 minutes, and the council does not respond or engage in debate. Any speaker that engages in threatening or disorderly behavior will be deemed out of order and their time ceased.
All right, first up, Gary Lambert.
Good evening. My name is Gary Lambert. Over the last 4 years, the city has experienced a 30% increase, in excess of a 30% increase in our revenue. Yet you're going to significantly raise taxes and fees again this year. I'd like to read as far as I can get, an extract out of a public comment letter that was written on November 20th. It said, I signed mortgage papers for my home 12 years ago. I could finally provide stability for my sons and I. Over the years, through the very low income I had, I was able to pay my 0% mortgage on time every month. Since last year, I have had to split my mortgage payment into 2 payments to make it work. How am I supposed to cover the property tax increases the last 2 years with my income? Which of you are putting groceries back on the shelves before you get to the checkout line? Or taking groceries out of the basket and not getting them once you get into the checkout line? There is no reason on God's green earth to hike somebody's property taxes to such an extreme without any regard to what it does to the individual and whether they can pay it. That reminds me of a pretty famous quote back in 1954 during the McCarthy hearings. Have you no sense of decency? Thank you.
All right, next up is Christina Barnett, And then to follow will be Tobias Horner Brooks.
Good evening. My name is Christina. I'm a resident of Ward 4. I'm here to address the city council in response to the removal of the houseless encampment. This is the third time the city has done this without providing these folks a useful solution. We can't just keep pushing these people more into the margins. And this most recent time was particularly insidious because you did it when the weather was 50 degrees, pushing people out with nowhere to go, no shelter, no way to stay warm right before it froze. You know, you don't work with the current systems we have in place. That's, you know, the non-for-profits. I mean, there's an article that just came out a few days ago from those non-for-profits that we rely on. You know, if somebody calls in and says they have nowhere to go, you tell them to go to these places. And it's disheartening to see that they are telling us that the city's not working with them. And, you know, when I did a lot of door knocking for my alderman, I expect that the city is going to address that. You know, I work in downtown Bloomington, and I cannot tell you how many times every single day I see somebody sleeping on a park bench and I see somebody begging for money. And this is in downtown Bloomington. Like, people should not be subjected to this level of inhumanity and dehumanization. It's ridiculous. We need to utilize our public housing, we have vacant properties all over the city. We need to be establishing community land trusts and establishing $1 rentals. I mean, we did that for the Sunnyside community farm, you know, and we stopped doing that. So we stopped feeding people, and we're not addressing the current houseless population. We need to do better than that. We, you know, pride ourselves on being a champion, and we're a democratic state. We pride ourselves on taking care of people, but we aren't doing that. I mean, people can't afford rent, and there's nowhere for people to go. My friends here in town live in Chenoa because they have no choice. There's no affordable housing for them. We need to do better, I guess is just what I'm saying here. I mean, you need to just talk to the people who are doing the work right now. That's not hard. They're there, and they ask you to work with them, and I'm asking you to work with them. There's no reason why every day I have to see somebody sleeping on a park bench and give them a warm meal when the city has the funds to do it and we have the property to do it. Please don't let me down. Thank you.
Next up, we have Tobias Horner, and then to follow Jackie Byer.
My name is Tobias Horner Brooks. I'm here to give public comment regarding the gender identification or gender ID be added as a protected class in the city of Bloomington. I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a proud US veteran, and up until now, most of you wouldn't know that I'm also a trans man. For those of you who don't know, I was assigned female at birth. I transitioned back in 2016. Because I have what's called passing privilege, I really don't face discrimination anymore. That's not able to be seen for people who aren't able to access medical care, who aren't able to get gender affirming surgeries, hormones, clothing. Before I was able to get that, I did get discriminated against, both up in Chicago where I'm from, but also down here. Very privileged again, and I acknowledge my privilege, and I refuse to let my privilege stand in the way of me speaking up for those who aren't able to be privileged and have that privilege. I'm seen as a cis white man walking down the street. I have friends who are African American or Hispanic. They don't have that privilege. When I moved to Bloomington, it was the first time in my life where I actually felt accepted thanks to the bistro here. It was the first time that I not only was empowered to be a trans man, but I was embraced in a community. And in my firm belief, if this was adopted into Bloomington law as a protected class, it would open up a lot of avenues for people who do not have the privilege that I do. And I'm not just talking about trans men, trans women. There's also non-binary folks as well who face even more discrimination. It just goes less noticed. But I do strongly encourage you, if you do believe that Bloomington is supposed to be this welcoming city, diverse city, that this be added as a protected class and help Bloomington be the step forward and be the shining star to all of Central Illinois. Maybe other places will adopt it. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Jackie Byer, and then to follow Lynn Meyer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Byer. There is no reason for a levy increase for either the library or the city. Given the staggering level of revenue from tax sources other than property taxes, there is more reason to decrease the city levy than to increase it or leave it flat. While libraries are important to support literacy and education, the expansion was never necessary. It was just a nicety. The library expansion is not within budget because of frugality, but because of luck. The library got an unexpected windfall of $1.4 million in state grant funds on the back of other libraries who were not able to obtain their matching funds. They also increased their budget by $400,000 to account for new interest revenue. That is over $1.8 million in additional revenue that was not expected in the original budget. So do you think that $1.8 million is going back to the taxpayers? Of course not. They are spending it. When initially presented, the expansion cost was supposed to be about $22.8 million. Then $25.2 million was approved. Now the budget is $26.3 million, and they have almost $750,000 allocated in budgeted surplus. Initially, the library wanted to propose a levy increase of about 8.1%. But then the library was told to keep the increase below 5%. The library's official proposal is a levy increase of 4.9%. The reduction of the levy increase was not achieved by a reduction in budgeted expenses, but only because the city is allocating more of the personal property replacement tax, PPRT, to the library. In previous years, $130,400 was allocated, but now over $424,000 is being allocated for fiscal year 2025. In the past, all of the allocated PPRT was budgeted to cover expenses, but this year the library is holding back more than $94,000 of the PPRT into budgeted surplus ready to spend, rather than reducing the levy even further. The library has been nothing but a bunch of financial bait and switches and twisted tails. And probably the most frustrating thing is that the city knew of the huge water and sewer project coming down the pipeline, yet kept it from the public. The city is choosing to gouge the property taxpayers by raising levies to put more funds towards niceties, when funds to the niceties should have gone to the necessities. Thank you.
Next up, we have Lynn Meyer, and then to follow Zach Carlson.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Meyer. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a resident of the city of Bloomington from the Blooming Grove subdivision. I'm here to talk to you about the need to update the human rights ordinance. For the last 8 years, I've been educating healthcare organizations, first responders, nonprofits, and faith-based communities about how to advocate for the LGBTQI community. In the last 2 years, I've been researching the importance of affirming a person's gender identity in employment and in healthcare. As someone who constantly gets misgendered with terms like ma'am and sir, and struggles with what bathroom is safe for me to use, I welcome the changes to the Human Rights Ordinance that supports gender identity here in Bloomington. Trans and gender diverse employees and patients face discrimination for simply identifying as their gender identity. Discrimination includes not being addressed by their chosen name and pronouns, being harassed about how they express their gender, being passed over for a promotion, having their workload diminished, and being fired from their job. There are employment issues surrounding employment retention rates, lack of diversity in staff, and discrimination, including sexual harassment and hostile work environment and workplace culture for trans and gender diverse people. We're seeing victimization as significant systemic issues surrounding gender and sexual minorities. The need for having your gender affirmed goes deep to the core of who you are or who we are as human beings. And the need for connection is vital to our health and well-being. When someone affirms someone's gender identity, whether they're cisgender or transgender, we allow that person to live authentically in the larger, and they feel connected to their community, their neighborhoods, and the larger city of Bloomington. When we feel connected, our mental and our physical health improves. So I ask that you vote to support the proposed changes to the ordinance. Thank you.
Next up, we have Zach Carlson, and then to follow Raylene Gomez Hernandez.
Hello, my name is Zach Carlson. I came here to speak primarily about the homelessness issue that came up in the WJBC article this past week. I'm sure most of you have seen by now, and I've already heard spoken about. I just want to echo that it is very disappointing that this is now the third time that the city is going to be removing a homeless camp within a year. I also would like to point out that removing this is a choice that I'm sure you all have the power to rescind. Chief back there can probably also just not do it as well. You choose not to give out speeding tickets. We see this because the GLT article in June, or this summer we'll say, came out and showed that Bloomington, for better actually, doesn't give out tickets. They just say, hey, don't do it again. And they show that it works. Where normal, they price gouge you. They take every penny you can. So we know it's a choice. We know we choose what we enforce and what we don't enforce. So let's choose not to enforce this time and let them just stay where there are services, there is security relatively, and there is a safe place for them, as safe as homelessness can be. That, reminds me or connects it to a few of the things that people spoke about today, about property taxes, about housing. It seems that homeowners, myself included, are now feeling the pinch that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. The housing crisis, the prices are going up. They didn't experience before, they didn't care before. Most didn't care because it was rentals going up, right? They didn't care about rentals, they owned. Who cares? Now it's hurting, and everyone is rightfully, upset, worried. Nothing necessarily here to do with any of you, right? You can't control capitalism, unfortunately, as much as I wish you could. But I think this starts a conversation that we really need to speed up our affordable housing efforts. We need to start that years ago, to be honest, but now let's really work forward. Let's see if we mentioned land trusts, there's one starting up. Municipal public housing, just like they do in Europe, right? We can buy and build our own homes to house people. We can't do rent control, but you can advocate to lift the ban on rent control to the state, and we can put taxes on a tax on rental profits, right? Don't tax the property, tax the profits. They're the ones that's really gouging. So that's that. It's my more unprepared speeches. I'm sorry I've become a regular, but good to see you all, and we'll catch you later.
All right, next up, we have Raylene Gomez Hernandez, and then to follow Dave Bentlin.
Hi, everyone. Good night. My name is Raylene Gomez Hernandez. First time speaking in something like this, so please bear with me. I'm here to give public comment on the proposed ordinance change to add gender identity as a protected class. I've been a Bloomington inhabitant for a long time. I mean, Bloomington High School, ISU for undergrad, then grad school, and I currently work at Illinois Wesleyan University. So I wanted to take a different kind of approach and talk about education. So I am an educator by trade. Basically, I've taught at District 87, District 116 in Urbana High School, and I'm currently one of the directors for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Illinois Wesleyan. And I work with a lot of different student populations. I work with a lot of different ages and groups. And what I've come to see is that this could be very important for the students and the youth that we have in this town. Unfortunately, I deal with a lot of students who have to deal with heartbreak, insecurity, and a lot of the times very difficult problems because they don't feel protected when they're transgender or non-binary. It's taking a lot of strides in the educational field to kind of move to create this kind of defenses for them. I know universities like ISU and Wesleyan and Harlan are trying really hard to respect pronouns and name changes and things like that. So I feel like the city should really get on that too. If you feel like this issue is kind of far from you, let me give you a little bit of an example. Population demographics, at least for Wesleyan, right now we have about 30% LGBT plus queer students out of the 100% population. That's a third. And out of that third, actually we have closer to 18% who are transgender, gender non-binary, or gender fluid. With the times changing, this is really changing the population too and giving more freedom to students and people to feel to be their true selves. So I feel like if the city were to add this, it would really benefit all the populations for the youth and adults that we have. So that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you so much for your time and please consider it. Thank you.
All right, next up we have Dave Bentland, and then to follow Scott Steimling.
Hello, my name is Dave Bentland. I've been a resident of Bloomington Normal for the past 43 years, and I'm here this evening representing the Prairie Pride Coalition, Bloomington Normal's LGBTQ community organization. I am here to comment on tonight's meeting agenda item that would add gender identity to the city's human rights ordinance. The ordinance bans discrimination in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodations, and financial transactions based on a variety of characteristics, including age, marital status, religion, national origin, ancestry, familial status, military status, and several other categories. Tonight's amendment to the ordinance would add language that protects members of the transgender and non-binary communities from discrimination. This language is consistent with the language found in the Illinois Human Rights Act and would bring the city in line with the statewide statutes. Our city has increasingly grown more diverse since the ordinance was last amended 21 years ago. The local transgender and non-binary communities have increased in numbers, and in response, the Prairie Pride Coalition, in collaboration with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bloomington Normal, in 2021 created the Gender Expansive Resource Center. This project offers members of the transgender and non-binary communities a clearinghouse of resources and information, including specialized garments, information about local medical resources, and other services, including name and gender change legal assistance. To date, we have served more than 80 clients in our local Bloomington Normal area. A local human rights ordinance that is inclusive of the transgender and non-binary populations that live in, work in, and visit Bloomington would offer them the same equity that is offered to others in our city. It would provide them access to file discrimination complaints with the Bloomington Human Relations Commission and seek redress locally. This local remedy is important. Filing a complaint on the state level takes additional time and usually requires travel to Springfield or Chicago to attend hearings and depositions. An amended ordinance would provide consistency with the state law and send a strong signal that members of our transgender and non-binary communities feel safe, protected, and welcome in this community. We ask you to support this ordinance amendment. Thank you.
Next up, we have Scott Steimling, and then last, Serena Fish.
Scott Steimling, Ward 5 or 4. The majority of residents rake the leaves in the street, not to the parkway. When we have a big rain, it comes down and it floods. It plugs up the inlets and which floods the streets. When I realize they're to be right to the parkway, but people rake them in the street with absolutely no consequences at all. And until there are consequences, they're going to continue it. There, one day recently, they were raked on both sides of the street. It cuts it down to one lane road. There was a car coming one way. They were not going to yield. I had to pull over and let them through, or there'd have been a head-on collision. I don't know when the city's, plus the fact, then they let them rake him to the parkway. Then there's a big wind, comes over, rounds and redistributes them. What's wrong with putting them in bags that can be emptied out when the leaf vacuum comes? Because you never know when they're coming. Or maybe we should let some of the people on the city council as well as the city manager get out and help them rake those up again. You know, this leaves a horrible taste in the public's mouth. Plus, it's just flooded the street, and you know you can barely get through. That, you know, winter the street's going to be right done. We didn't need this council chamber all done like this. What's wrong with putting it in the roads where it's in the sidewalks where it counts? What's wrong with putting every sidewalk ADA like it should have been in 1990? And here we are at 2023, ready to go into 24, and they're still not ADA accessible. That's over almost 35 years late, Tim. When are we going to do something? Or maybe Mr. Ricky needs to address this. I've said everything I got to say. Thank you.
Last up, we have Serena Fish.
Good evening, Serena Fish, Ward 6. We had, two things. One, the tent city, which is in Ward 6. There have been numerous problems there. I want you to understand there's a playground across the street. There's a playground one building over. There's a juvenile center. There's a library. In city ordinances, you cannot put that item there. Also, in the PSCRB meeting the other night, the chief addressed us some of the problems that have been in that tent city: drug overdose, fights, a fire, trash. I had a gentleman come in the store today where I was, and he mentioned something about he was from the tent city and he was looking for a heater. And I'm like, okay. Long story short, I did something very simple, which is what I've been doing for West Side neighbors on property tax. I said, are you aware of 211? And he just looked at me. I said, do you have a phone? Yes. I said, they will help you find a place. They will help you get food. They will help you maybe get a job. But you all have to understand at this point, the tent city is full of residents who choose not to be in a building, who choose not to follow the rules, who choose not to spend money on rent, but to spend money on drugs and alcohol. If you go by the area there and get out and offer some help, you can smell the weed. So they have money. They just choose not to use it. But there have been numerous criminal instances in the area. The other thing is, on the PSCRB meeting the other night was really good. Thank you for Ms. Bowen showing up. Thank you for Mr. Becker for being kind enough to send in a public comment. And a couple of you said you were out of town, but the rest of you didn't show up, and you should have. It was a really, really good meeting with stakeholders, and it was important. Please read the minutes. Thank you.
There's no further public comment.
Thank you. So at this point, we're gonna move to the consent agenda. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor, I'd like to pull an item. This is Molly.
Sure. Which one?
7L.
7L. Okay.
And Mayor, just a reminder that we had a recommendation from staff to pull item 7K, and
That's
you're
right.
asking to table that item to January 8th
That's right.
of
So we're,
2024.
yes, so so then can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 7K and 7L?
I will make that motion.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Boland. Is there a second?
This is Tom Crumpler. I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Councilmember Crumpler. And Madam Clerk, how are we doing this? Are we doing online, right? Voting?
We are going to do it electronically.
Okay.
And just for clarification, so we're going to go with the exception of 7L and 7K, but 7K is not just being pulled, but it's being tabled to January 8th, if that's okay with the motioners. Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes and there are no nays to announce. Moving next to item 7L, and Councilmember Ward pulled this item, so I will yield to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I asked for this to be pulled not because I have any problems with the spirit of the ordinance itself. I'm heartily in favor of this and think that it is long overdue. I think it could be made better though, and I'd prefer to see us do this right the first time. And so I would like to propose an amendment to Section 2, definitions, the definition unlawful discrimination. I'd simply like to remove 3 words, the words his or her. And I'd like it simply to read, unlawful discrimination means discrimination against a person because of actual or perceived, and then so forth. I believe that this really would go much further with the spirit of this this update that is long overdue. And I think it's an opportunity for us to frankly set a model for other communities around our state.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And so this is under unlawful discrimination, right? And you're just asking to remove his or her.
Correct. 3 words,
Okay.
his
Those 3
or
words.
her.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I have a comment to make.
Oh, sure.
This is Donna. I was under the impression that his and her, there are personal pronouns that are used in conjunction with signatures. So I actually think leaving those words in the ordinance makes sense to me. And I am always a fan of making sure that the city is following state statute rather than going off on their own. So I would rather have it follow state statute. And if there is a need for change that's that strong, to have it go through the proper channels of contacting state legislatures, state legislators, and get it changed at that level.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
I guess I just have a question. This is Sheila for corporate counsel. Was this written verbatim out of the state statute? And what observations might you share with us about consistency with the language in the state statute?
The, excuse me, the proposed definition that's used in our proposed amendment is verbatim from the state statute. It's exactly what the state statute says. Is there a second part of that question I need to answer?
Just the question is, what are the consequences to us if we are writing an ordinance that is inconsistent with the language in the state statute?
You run the risk of different interpretation. In Ms. Ward's suggestion, I think it becomes an objective standard instead of a subjective standard. Right now, as it's written, it says because of his or her actual or perceived, which implies to me a viewpoint from the individual who claims to have been discriminated against. When you take out the his or her and you just say because of actual or perceived, you open up the door to maybe an objective standard, meaning the people who are deciding it decide whether or not from their perspective there has been discrimination. That's just kind of how I see it. In order to be, I'm not saying that would happen, I'm just saying it's a risk. In order to be maybe more clear, if you're going to take his or her out, I think you might say something like, because of the person, that person's actual or perceived race, color, religion, so on and so forth, like that. That's all. I'm just, otherwise, I don't have any other thoughts on it.
I also agree with that suggestion, because I too kind of struggled with, do we take the words out? Do we put something in that is also very inclusive instead of just having it kind of, I think that it reads a little awkward.
I would
So,
welcome that.
Yeah.
So I'd be fine with that.
Could we just use there? Which is what most federal statutes are going to, and if we can approve upon the state statute, I'm all for that.
I'm more comfortable with the persons.
Okay.
So then to clarify, would you be amending your motions on the floor to instead say persons?
If that would be the appropriate way to go about that. Otherwise, I can withdraw it and make another motion. Yeah.
Clarify, I think the way it ought, if you're going to do that, the way it ought to read is probably against a person because of that person's actual or perceived race, color, so on and so forth.
Like he
So it would be
said.
that person's possessive.
Sure.
And I think that accomplishes what you're intending.
Yes.
Okay.
And
fine with that as a
and you-
second.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So it doesn't look like we have any other comments, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So shall we vote? Okay, the item passes and there are no nays to announce. Now we're going to move on to the regular agenda and a consideration and action on an ordinance amending the Bloomington City Code, updating chapter 6, 7, 21, 29, 32, 36 41, 43, and 45, and deleting chapters 9, 22, 22.5, 26, and 30 pertaining to licenses administered by the city clerk. And an ordinance amending the Bloomington City Code, updating chapters 7, 29, 32, 36, 41, and 43 regarding penalties and the schedule of fees in chapter 1 pertaining to licenses as requested by the city clerk department. And I am going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for some initial remarks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and to the community. This is part two of what City Clerk Leslie Yoakum and her team have been working on. So it's brought back before council this evening. We thought that we would be able to get it wrapped up this evening, but we'll probably have an additional cleanup in January. There is going, before I turn the floor over, there is going to be two areas that have been, that will be removed. Council's prepped. But Leslie, if you would, please walk us through this.
Thank you. First, should we start and ask the mayor to repeat that subject again? I'm just teasing. No,
No, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. As I've said before, thank you for the opportunity to present this to you. We, as City Manager Gleason mentioned, this is our second presentation. I just wanted to do a short recap. In October, we completely rewrote the Chapter 6, which is applicable to alcoholic beverages. And we removed 3 outdated licenses and then actually cleared an entire chapter out of our code, which is kind of exciting from an update standpoint. What he was mentioning about additional updates that we'll have, there's a few different licenses that deserve additional attention. And so we'll look at updating those this spring. One that has been a hot topic has been massage parlors, sexually oriented businesses. And we want to partner with a local organization to focus on human trafficking and things like that in central Illinois. So that one, the other one that is actually going to impact the motion that I asked for after my presentation involves Chapter 21, which is the refuse code, and Chapter 36, which is scavengers. We had supplied our edits to the county for additional feedback and trying to help with partnering with them on those chapters, and they gave us some feedback on Friday, which of course was after the packet went out. So we will continue to work with Public Works in the county on those. And again, when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit more about how that motion will need to go, given if there's other changes. So in regards to tonight, the code that we're looking at is heavily from the late 70s and 80s. We've done some updates, of course, with other chapters, but a lot of it that we're looking at updating is there. We are asking to update 8 chapters. That's removing the 2 that I mentioned. So it was originally 10. Clearing out 5 different chapters, which is quite impressive. I think, and then eliminating a total of 4 licenses, transferring 1 to another department. We originally proposed a transfer of 3, but you'll see that really rooming houses and parolee group homes we've put under elimination because those 2 are either already regulated underneath our zoning code or they are being pushed underneath a rental registration program, which already exists. And then last, we are going to look at creating 2 additional licenses. The first one is entertainment venue operators, and the second is amusement terminal owners. So one of the things that's kind of interesting with those 2 licenses is this is really where we come about combining license. So right now, you would see that we're separately licensing jukeboxes or what we call mechanical musical devices. Automatic amusement devices there's 10 different types of license underneath that one, everything from pinballs to movie devices, shuffleboards, and billiards. So this project is really all about improving process. We originally talked to you last presentation about our 3 pillars. That was safety, consistency, and enforcement. And this one just that's exactly where it aligns, just the same. So we have process improvements made where we're aligning all license across each variety of or category, aligning the practices with what we do today, focusing on consistency and equal treatment. We have cleaned up gender pronouns on these just the same as we did last time. Archaic family references again. We've renamed license so that they make a little bit more sense today. I mean, one of my favorite ones to talk about is public dancing, footloose style, you know, kind of things like that. So we're not going to move away from not licensing some of these things, but what we are going to do is look at the reasons that we license them. So for public dancing, if the goal of ECD is to get out and look at dance floors that are larger than 99 square feet because they're, you know, worried about cramming a lot of people in a space and making sure that from a safety perspective, you know, we've done the fire inspections that we need to do, or they want to inspect permanent stages so that somebody can't build one overnight for a DJ and then take it down next week and it not have been safe for people to utilize. So we really tried to be mindful of the practices that we have today, the things that we hear from our licensees. We continue to move everything online. We've actually removed quite a few things that we previously had businesses having to submit to us, one of which is the State of Illinois Certificate of Good Standing. We go out and check that anyway. So while we were having them go and pull it and then send us a copy, you know, just these duplicative efforts and things like that. So I think it's a great evaluation of staff time, our business owners' time, safety, focusing on what really matters to the community. Other things that we did is we standardized application fees. It was kind of, these ones have to pay it and these ones don't. And so we took it down to what's the staff cost. We have unified applications so that the same things are required. So when somebody calls and asks a question, it's front of mind for us. Like, what does a penal bond look like? It looks the same for everybody. We really shouldn't be picking and choosing. There is one difference when it comes to a penal bond. I want to say that is for like pawnbrokers or some those others that have higher criminal activity behind them, they're $5,000. But nonetheless, it's standardized with reason behind it. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Say thank you to Ashley Lara, my interim deputy clerk, who is really our records and licensing specialist on a regular basis. So she's here to keep me in line tonight so I don't misstate anything. And then also Jake Boyd and Javier Romano, who worked in our department. George Boyle in legal has been instrumental with all of this. And it was really important. He's the one who actually goes to bat for us and our businesses on a regular basis. It was important that he had participated. And then ECD, Public Works and Police were heavily involved as well. So thank you for that. Before we go forward with questions, Mayor, if you don't mind, we have two ordinances that are presented. The reason that they're separated in the way that they are, the first one is about language to the chapters. And because we're at the end of the year and my license draw to the end on the 31st, and these new license renewals start on January 1, we needed to come forward with two different ordinances. The second one is all about penalties and fees that involve changes. Ordinances that are put in that we have to put them in pamphlet form, but language changes can become effective upon signature and attestation. The ones that impact penalties and schedule of fees, they have a 10-day grace period. So by doing this, tomorrow, Ashley will start to be able to roll out some of the changes if you approve them. And then the penalties and fees section will become effective 10 days later. So with that, I think that's all I've got, Mayor. And I can speak to the motion when you're ready for that, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Leslie, and for you and your staff and also other staff members within the city who participated. This looks like a valiant effort. And so with that, I'm going to ask council members, maybe let's start if there is do you want discussion first? Let's start with discussion, see if you have questions. Anybody has questions?
I just have one question. This relates, I guess, to the penalties. In Article 9, circuses and carnivals. I realize that we don't have very many circuses, menageries, Wild West shows, or other exhibitions showing in tents or open air. Occasionally we do, I guess, but I'm just struck by how low the violation penalty is. Pay not less than $5 nor more than $100 for each offense. And I'm curious, like, how does that get set in that regard? And does that really deter somebody from having a menagerie without a license?
So I will tell you, there are actually a total of 9 license types that we didn't touch. I mentioned a couple of them, but circuses and carnivals you'll see as unedited as well. The reason behind that is we actually have been working with departments at looking at a potential festival license. So tailgates and tall boys, that kind of thing. And so that would be something that we would like to bring forward in the spring. And so we didn't want to double touch an ordinance, if you will, or I'm sorry, part of the code and not, so I could just really quick. So circuses, carnivals, massage parlors, sexually oriented business, the potential for festivals, scavengers, vehicles for hire, solicitors, food trucks, and sales by cart. And so all of those, I would say, are 75% written, but all of them have a reason on why they should be focused individually. And we'll look to do that early spring.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, this is Sheila. I just had, I guess, more of a comment, a request. I understand the antiquated language concerning rooming houses, and I appreciate our clerk's explanation to me that that really is kind of in the lane of fraternity and sorority houses and so forth. As we talk in this community about housing shortages and about affordability of housing, one area emerging in other municipalities that I have now brought forth for over 2 years here in the city council is the continued growth of short-term rentals, which is impacting not only housing stock and its availability, but also it's impacting rents in this community. I just want to reiterate, and I don't know whether or not this is more of an issue for code enforcement or if this should require a change in our area. My last comment just relates to one particular area within Ward 3 that brought this to my attention in mid-year of 2021. Where a single family home in a single family zoned neighborhood has been divided into 5 units. And each of these 5 units is being rented as short-term rentals on Airbnb. So again, because of the removal of the language of rooming houses, that's my purpose for reiterating my prior comments in this area, because I felt that the rooming houses language was the closest thing that we had to be able to address this. Requiring short-term rentals to be registered is different than allowing effectively rooming houses, in my language, or apartments divided into as many as 10 units in single family zoned areas. So just wanted to get that again on the radar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Other
will make a
questions?
motion to approve.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Bolin. Is there a second?
I'll
If
second.
sorry to interrupt, if I could really quickly, just so that if you were going for it as presented, if we could just make sure to amend it to not include chapter 21 and chapter 36, which was that refuse and scavengers.
Is that okay with you, Councilmember Bolin?
Yes, as amended.
As amended. Okay, sounds good. And I think it was it Councilmember Crumpler who was getting ready to second?
Yes, Mayor, as amended.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Voting electronically.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. The item passes. There are no nays to announce. And now we're gonna move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8B. That I believe we are doing just one presentation for B and C and then voting separate. Is that correct? Or am I misreading that? And I'm looking at City Manager Gleason because he can't see me, but
That's correct, Mayor.
okay, sounds good. Okay. And item B is a consideration and action on an ordinance levying taxes for the city of Bloomington in Illinois for the fiscal year beginning May 1, 2023 and ending April 30th, 2024 for the city of Bloomington in the amount of $23,420,384 as requested by the Finance Department. So, and item C will be the levy for the library in the amount of $6,580,000. And so at this point, I think I'm gonna turn it over to City Manager Gleason for to introduce the item, and then we will go to Scott Raffin. Just a reminder about, time, because I think we only have 10 minutes for city council discussion on each of the items. So the library and the city.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just very brief comments, and then Mayor, for you, I will not have any opening comments when item C and D end up being called.
Okay.
What I was going to say is, in preparation for tonight, very open conversations, about our financial condition, the different projects that we have as a city council. Actually take tremendous pride in what we do as staff, making sure that this council's prepped, not just for the agenda item, but what we envision the longer term impacts could be on any given topic that comes before council. So with that being said, the water rate discussion that was just approved a couple of weeks ago. One thing that we do is we make sure that we talk about these in a much larger conversation. We don't do one and then hold a secret about some of the things that are coming before council and then bring the next item. We're very open, contrary to some of the comments that I've heard previously. They're just not accurate. So the water rate will more than double at the end of a 3-year period. That's already been approved by council. And that's something that no fault of this current council or staff, that the rate had not increased in this community since 2011. We're at a point that council made a very tough decision to make the water rate call that they did about a month ago. Related to the property tax rate, what was captured is a 10.7% increase. This council made it very clear in 3-on-1s regarding the water rate that they did not want us to capture this entire 10.7%, regardless of what the other taxing bodies are doing. And it doesn't really matter. This is about the city of Bloomington. So what staff brought forward is 4.93%. The library decided to do the same thing. I prepped council based on what Jeannie Hamilton had shared with us, that the operational amount was not going to be reduced, but additional revenues were found in the PPRT. That's something that council was prepped. And you'll see that the library's rate is identical to what the city is bringing forward at 4.93%. So I guess at the end of the day, council's prepped. this will play out as it should and respect the decision of council. Scott Rathman will provide the presentation. Go for it, Scott.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Council. Just to be consistent with the estimate, we decided to do the presentation combined and then splitting up the items as was requested for the estimate. So maybe next year we'll do two separate presentations, but for this year, a combined presentation, two separate items for council to discuss and consider. Are there no changes from the estimate? So this presentation will be a shortened summary version of that presentation back in November. So next slide, please. As the city manager mentioned, it's not included on this slide, but there's an estimated 10.7% overall EAV increase for the city. That'd be about an EAV of around 2.3 billion. What we're proposing is the city recognizing a 4.93% increase in the actual levy request. So that's 1.1 million and restricting all that to public safety pensions. The library, approximately 309,000, again, 4.93% to cover inflation and staffing needs. So this increase of 4.93%, from my understanding and what I've reviewed, is the lowest increase of all the large taxing bodies in the area. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the city of Bloomington proposes a levy increase of 1.1 million, 4.9%. Inflation over the last couple of years has been 11%. So that's a driving factor in our revenue use, our revenue needs, et cetera. This increase will be restricted for public safety pensions at $550,000 between the fire pension fund and the police pension fund. The annual contribution as calculated by the city's actuaries is increasing by 2.4 million this year. So it's going from 12.3 million to 14.7. We have a total liability as of the year-end audit of 148 million. So to put the context in place, for that long-term need for the city. Without this increase, the city will have a $3 million shortfall in restricted revenues related to public safety pension funding. So the primary sources of funding are the levy and utility taxes. And without this increase, we're going to have about a $3 million shortfall. Next slide, please. The library proposes a levy increase of 309,000. Again, that's 4.93% increase over the prior year. Another reference to the amount of inflation that's incurred over the last couple of years. And the library relies primarily on the tax levy as its source of funding. It doesn't have the benefit from economically driven revenues. I refer to them as elastic revenues like sales taxes like the city does. Next slide, please. And sorry to repeat, but while we're doing separate items on the agenda tonight, we are showing this combined view of the city and the library. So the city proposes a $23.4 million levy for the 2023 tax year for FY25 budget year, approximately 6.6 million for the library, and that's $30 million total. So you can see the city rate will be approximately 1.03%, the library 0.29% for a combined rate of 1.3228%. And this is a change, a reduction of 0.0726%. Now, having said this, and we referred to the 4.3% and a reduction in the rates, we want to be transparent. We went through this during the estimate. So on a 4.93%, assuming that all values of all homeowners have gone up, that there's 10.7% increase overall. We have about 1.1% increase for new growth. So assuming about 9.7, let's just call it 10% increase on average for a homeowner. For a $165,000 house, that's going to be an increase of about $31. Doubling that for a $330,000 house, that'd be an increase of about $62 for the tax levy, the tax bill, excuse me. Next slide, please. Very quick presentation this evening, just kind of wrapping up, doing a summary of the estimate. So at this time, I recommend 2023 final tax levies be approved. The city levy to be addressed first according to the agenda. Questions and discussion?
I would like to make a motion, sorry, Scott, to keep the levy flat.
I'll second that.
And are you, Councilmember Bolin, are you talking about the levy flat, are you talking about the library? the
Compared to
city?
last year, I can make some comments as to my thinking behind this. Um, well, the reason I would like to keep the levy flat or the same as last year is because from the questions I asked about how much the water rate is, dollar amount is going up, how much the dollar amount is going up for a house, and they basically are equivalent. And I would like to, we need the water work. We need the water work done. You can't live without water. So that the households will have to absorb. However, I think that the property tax can be reduced by the $30 per household in order to provide some relief for the homeowners. I have gotten a lot of feedback from people that are on fixed income. The cost of living for most employees has not gone up in years. Cost of living has gone up significantly. Specifically, the people that live in the zip code 61701, which is described as food and housing insecurity, need to be considered very thoughtfully when raising taxes and water bills. Regarding public safety funding, I would like to examine the formulation during budget period to see what we can do. You know, that increase in tax for the, what is it, the utility telecom, that was really, in my mind, was kind of a patch. We thought it would work, but it didn't. It didn't produce enough revenue to hold us over. I mean, that's my view. So for that reason, I would like to keep the levy from last year flat, and for the benefit of the individuals in the community that would be detrimentally affected by the increase.
And again, just to clarify, you're saying flat, you're saying, so you're looking at a combined, right? Library and city? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I am technically, yes, looking at the combined and that the levy remain the same as the previous year.
The dollar amount is what you're.
I think, Mayor, this city manager, I would just like to hold to, even if that is what Alderperson Bolin would like to do for item C, I'd rather focus on B right now.
Mayor,
Are there other?
yeah, Mayor, this is Tom Crumpler. I received an overwhelming response from constituents in Ward 9 asking me to vote against the ordinance as it currently exists on the agenda. Folks are particularly troubled that the upcoming increase in water bills coupled with increased property tax will be a burden on homeowners. I've had people indicate that they're considering leaving Bloomington. In a previous council meeting, I suggested accessing other sources of revenue, specifically cannabis, online and gaming taxes, possibly reserves to keep our tax flat. And so I guess I'm speaking in support of Councilmember Boland's amendment to keep it flat. Thank you.
Well, I have my light on here, but I really would have very little to add. I've received an incredible amount of reach outs on this. I want to talk for just a moment about the public safety pension amount. I was very concerned to hear after similar language last year, indicating that the reason we were capturing the increase was that dedicated source for public safety pensions, and then to learn that in turn, we actually contributed less to those pensions than we did the prior year when we were using non-dedicated resources for that. I thank Councilmember Bolin for her motion, and I support that.
Are there other comments?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to speak, but we only have 12 seconds left, so.
Okay,
I
well, why
guess
don't
I'd
you
like-
make a
I'd
motion?
like to move that we extend comment by 5 minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I second. It's John
Okay,
Dannenberger, sir.
okay. Leslie, have you noted who's?
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Okay,
Yeah, Councilmember Ward, seconded by Councilmember Dannenberger, extension of 5 minutes.
okay.
Councilmember
Roll call?
Kurtz,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Dannenberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Hendricks.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, item passes. So Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to speak against this amendment and in favor of the of items 8B and C being approved as presented. As a community, we have work to do. We have work to do as a community. Residents have reminded us time and time again, including this evening, that our streets and sidewalks are in terrible shape in many neighborhoods. The floods of June 2021 reminded us terribly that the sewers that run beneath those surfaces are also in desperate need of updating. Nor are all of our issues hard infrastructure. We have obligations to follow through on the commitments we have made to the people who put their lives on the line every single day to keep us safe. We have obligations to create the kind of place that people want to live and work in. And that means having educational and recreational facilities that make Bloomington more than just a city, but also a community. The reality is that all of these things cost money, a lot of money. But frankly, if these things were the only considerations, we wouldn't be considering tonight lowering the tax rate at all. We'd simply hold it steady and allow rising property values to increase the resources available for the work we need to do. But we recognize, all of us recognize, that while those who are looking to sell their properties might be happy about rising property values, those who aren't looking to sell, and I include myself in this group because I love this community, those of us are feeling the weight of higher tax bills. I get it. That's why the city has proposed to actually lower the tax rate to offset some of the dollar increase of the levy. As a society, we have been scarred in recent years by too many either-or extremes that seek to limit us to increasingly narrow options. I believe that the people of this community are better than that. Voting in favor of items B and C, as they are presented, is an opportunity to find a middle way between two extremes. On the one hand, the rock of ignoring the real work that we as a community need to do. And on the other hand, the hard place of ignoring the real impact of increasing property values on members of our community. And while a yes vote on 8B and C as originally presented doesn't eliminate the pain altogether, it is a way of easing some of it while still getting work done. And we have work to do. So I urge my council members, my fellow council members, to vote no on this amendment and ultimately to vote yes on 8B and C as originally proposed. We've got work to do.
Are there other comments?
I have a comment to make. First of all, it's not an amendment, it's a motion. And secondly, property tax does not cover infrastructure. We are raising water rates to cover the water infrastructure. Every year, 3% increase on sewer and solid waste. The only part, I'm not saying get rid of the property tax. We're keeping it the same as last year, which means the park and rec and the public safety will have the same revenue source for their pay and their pensions. And as mentioned to Mr. Rathman, when we look at the budget going forward, I believe we need to look at a different and better formulation to bring the council's commitment to 100% funding by 2040. We have been hovering in the low to mid 50s for percent funding for quite some time. And I would like it to get closer to the mid 60s within the next 5 to 10 years, because we're getting close to the deadline. That's all I have to say.
Is there anybody else?
Can I just ask one quick question? So Alderperson Bolin said that we're bringing in the same amount of money as last year. We're not lowering it, but we are in fact going to lower our overall rate significantly if we reduce that $1.1 million that we would be bringing in, correct?
Yeah, by holding the levy request, the dollar amount flat, our rate will go down because our EAV went up.
And so if our EAV eventually levels out and levels out, but if we see some sort of decrease in that EAV, we'll be dealing with a significantly lower rate on that EAV next year, correct? Sorry.
Yeah, well, the way the levy works, because it's like your most guaranteed revenue source there is. So when we request a dollar amount, we're not absolutely guaranteed of getting that, but you're correct. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. If the EAV works its way down over time, we'll be looking at a rate increase to get our dollar amounts back up to where even if we kept them flat, go into the future. If our EAV comes down, if people contest their EAVs, then next year we'll have to increase our rate, even if we were keeping the levy this flat again. If that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like the water rate situation. Thank you.
I have one more clarifying question, if I may.
Sure,
You
go ahead.
mentioned, pardon?
No, I said, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Rathman, you mentioned that on a $165,000 house, we're talking about $30 a year. And
yes,
could you check my math for me? That's $2.50 a month.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what a cup of coffee costs these days, but less than that, huh? Or more than that. Yeah.
I'm here. There's no further lights on.
There's no further lights on. Okay.
Point of
Correction, sorry.
Point of clarification, we're just voting on 8B, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's on the amendment to keep it flat from last year.
Well, let me just kind of share a couple of thoughts here. I do think the staff put together a proposal that I think really took, in my opinion, was kind of balanced, taking into consideration what the public the expenses and as you've heard, that we have I mean, other public bodies, have chosen to capture much more. But I do think, this was definitely an attempt to really strike that balance, capturing a little bit of that growth, taking into account some of the expenses that we have to face in the future. And we also have to again think about the fact that we have quite a few things that need to happen next year, and there are times that I think we've made, for example, this past year, we made a decision, I believe, on the acceleration of Locust Colton to spend an extra $2 million, which I think was the right thing to do. But I think, those are also things that I think can, come into play. So there's quite a few things, a lot of demands on all of us as council members and city staff to address the many issues that we have to face. And I thought this was a really balanced approach, taking into consideration that the difficulties that people are having, but at the same time, trying to address some of the issues that we have. Not to mention, that it is likely that we'll also face, inflation next year as well. I don't think we're beyond that at this point. So I think we're ready to vote, correct? And we're voting on our ordinance on item B.
Yes, that's correct. 8B, and it's as amended by Councilmember Bolin and Councilmember Motney is the second. This would be to keep it flat from last year.
Okay.
So the screen that displays on your iPad is different. If you look at one of the screens on here, that's the only way I can edit it, so it's visible to the public.
Okay, so the item passes and there are 4 nays to announce, so we're keeping that portion flat on item B, right?
That is correct. Councilmember Kearns. Whoops. Councilmember Kearns, Councilmember Dannenberger, Councilmember Hendricks, and Councilmember Ward.
Okay. So I think we're ready to vote for item C. And what is is there a motion? Do we need a new
Yes,
motion?
Mayor, I'll move approval of item C as presented.
Second.
Okay. So motion by Councilmember Ward and second by Councilmember Hendricks. And,
I do have some questions, please.
okay,
A few things. My first questions are for the city. It's my understanding the effective increase that the library is seeking is actually about twice what we're voting on, because funds will be moved from the city under this PPRT to the library. Could you kind of explain that money flow and the implications of that? I think it was mentioned earlier, and I just want to better understand that.
Yeah, I'll kick this off, and then if Scott or the library director, Jeannie Hamilton, want to add to this. Sort of the rest of the story, maybe for the community, council's definitely aware because they've been prepped several times in the past. The initial ask when we were working up the tax levy item from the library was still below the 10.7%, but it was around the 8% range. And the reason was to cover some of the needs on the operational side. That everybody's aware that the council, or I'm sorry, that the library has recently been renovated and expanded. With that comes additional operational costs that I think Library Director Hamilton has more than justified. She runs a very, very tight ship. But during running parallel to this, other libraries learned that a lot of municipalities had removed or stopped funding a portion of the personal property replacement tax over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Well, it's coincidence only that if that had been reestablished by the city, them being a receiver of those funds that do belong to them, that would have offset the roughly 8% ask on the property tax rate that was initially being proposed. So it allowed for the property tax rate to be reduced to the 4.9%, 4.93%. It still will allow for the operational costs, the increase that library director has requested. But also I'm going to add at this point that there's some other library districts that are asking to be made whole for those past years of not receiving the entire PPRT amounts. That's not the case out of our library. So their ask is to maintain the 4.93%. And that's why I prefaced this conversation tonight that the operational costs were not being reduced, that they were being filled by the now reinstated PPRT funds that will be, will be going back to the library. And I'm sure I butchered that, Scott, some, but I know I hit the majority of it, and then obviously let Jeannie speak.
Just a couple clarifying comments. So personal property tax went away in 1970 something. And there was guidance from the state of Illinois that said, related to libraries specifically, whatever the proportion of the tax levy was the prior year, they should receive that proportion of PPRT tax going forward. So back in 2011 or 12, the portion of PPRT tax to the library was frozen. So it's been $130,000 for the last 11 years. And so it has gotten attention because PPRT revenues have gone up significantly. This is my assumption as to why it's become a discussion point among libraries. So it was brought to our attention. Myself and the budget manager, we went back, reviewed budget documents from back in 2010, confirmed that the tax levy proportion. The library, Jeannie provided some information from a report from the state of Illinois from that time frame that showed the allocation, that the proportions tied out. So it tied out from our information and the state's information. So the 10% of the coming year's projected property tax then was decided that should be appropriately designated to the library. So I don't know I can't remember the exact amount, but it was $400 and some thousand. So that was the net increase between the 130 and the 4 something was kind of a truing up of what should have been occurring for the last 11 years, where it should be a proportion, a 10% proportion of the PPRT.
Well, and to be accurate, it's a truing up for this year. It does not account all the years since 2011 that has been shorted to the library by the city.
So I'm looking at a countdown clock and I ask a question over about 20 seconds and I'm seeing now we have 1 minute and 4 seconds left. I do think this is an important topic and I want to go through just a couple more message points. In December of 2021, we learned that the library was receiving a grant for $5.68 million. At that time, the press release and the discussion at council indicated that 50% of that would be put toward principal and the other 50% would be put toward items that had previously been removed from the capital expenditure. I learned at our last meeting on November 21st that ultimately the grant was for 7.1 million. And I don't recall being advised as a council member of that difference, but that puts another $1.42 million for a total of $4,260,000 toward other things other than the construction project that was approved ultimately by this council. Tonight, what we're being asked to approve is a $309,000 change in the levy. We're just hearing that 400,000 is going to be coming back to shore up, evidently something that the city owed anyway. Looking back to the levy at 2020, we were at 4.967 million. And now we are at over 6.5 million, an increase of 31% in this levy just in those 4 years. So when did we learn about the 7.1 million and that total of 4.26 million that was not put toward principal that came in the form of grants? How is that money being utilized?
Real quick, Jeannie, I just want you to know that you're for the community again. Alderwoman Motney asked this question at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I forwarded it to Jeannie. Jeannie, your response, I did not have a chance to forward to council before the township meeting at 5:30. So they are not aware of the response that you've got to that question.
So we were originally notified by the state that we'd receive a $5.6 million grant, and the decisions were made about the project budget, reducing the bond amount and adding furniture, equipment, and technology items back in, and were based on that $5.6 million figure. Sometime later, after the bond had already been secured, we were notified by the state that several other libraries did not secure their matching funds and were therefore no longer eligible for the grant. And that increased our grant award to a total of 7.1 million. While the grant award was higher than originally anticipated, we have also raised less in donations than we had originally hoped. Actually, in my original proposals, it was 1.25 million we planned to raise in donations and grants. So in my mind, that balanced that out. And it should also be noted that the grant award is provided on a reimbursement basis at 30%, 60%, 90%, and 100% completion. So we don't actually have all the funds in hand right now. We have approximately 25% of the project remaining and are incredibly hopeful that our construction project costs will continue to be within budget, but it seems foolish to start reallocating funds when there are potential unanticipated costs and conditions that could be uncovered. Right now, we're in the demolition phase of the east side of our building, and that could uncover things that we aren't aware of. To further complicate matters, it's my understanding that both the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Bloomington and Bloomington Public Library for funding the library expansion and the bond documents call for the library to support the annual debt service through the tax levy. Based on previous conversations with Scott, I believe that we would need to consult bond counsel before determining whether we can reduce and/or abate the tax levy supported by debt service. Again, it seemed premature to have those conversations when the project had not been completed, essentially not knowing what revenues will be available.
So the last comment at the November 21st discussion, I believe it was indicated that this miraculously that this construction project would likely come in under budget.
It's not miraculous. It's an incredible amount of hard work by Jeannie and the staff, as well as our contractors. We're hopeful, we're very hopeful, but there are indeed, as always in these projects, as there were in the first half, as we open up the building, we discover things that weren't known. We have additional costs. There is still about 25% left, and we are extremely hopeful. And the staff, through taking on a lot of work that could have been contracted out, has probably saved the taxpayer about $600,000 or more so far. So it's not miraculous. It's a lot of hard work, and we very much anticipate that we're going to continue to see that hard work, but we just don't know right now exactly where we'll be at the end of this process.
So
Okay.
600,000,
I think we need to, how close are we here in terms of time?
447,
4:47.
my last
Okay.
question.
Okay, then
Um,
if we could make this the last one, that way we can move on. Thank you.
All right. So, I mean, that's great to know. It's great to have a number. I mean, and a number also that, is as much as twice as much as the amount that we're asking our community to pay in addition to what they've paid last year. So with 31% increase in this levy since 2020, again, where will that revenue then go to if there is in fact a $600,000 savings? And isn't that a source that perhaps you could draw upon in lieu of what you're asking us for tonight?
I think we have to be careful about that. I think we have to look at that when the project's done. I think the library board, that's ultimately conversations that they need to have so that those funds are earmarked for capital projects. So we can't transfer them over to maintenance and operating. But they could have discussions about whether to look into with bond council, reducing future debt service. But again, that is something that is the library board's purview, so I cannot speak to what their decision would be.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, this is Councilmember Crumpler. I have a comment. Along with other city council members and city officials, I attended the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Partnership event last week, hosted by Director Hamilton. We had Governor Pritzker, David Taylor, CEO of United Way, McLean County, parents, and a representative from the Dollywood Foundation, all speaking about the potential of this statewide partnership for families and children. It was also attended by many members of our community. And it was clear to me that our library is a star in this state. It provides essential literacy services and so much more for this community and beyond. I believe with this additional funding, Bloomington Public Library will continue to create programs and opportunities for families for many years to come. And I urge council to vote in favor of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Can somebody tell me where are we at time-wise?
Mayor, you have 2 minutes and 15 seconds left for speakers and nobody else has a light on.
Okay, sounds good. Then are we ready to vote?
We are, and just as a reminder, we have a motion from Councilmember Ward, seconded by Councilmember Hendricks to approve the item as proposed or presented this evening. Sorry, Mayor, you can't see, but I'm having some technical difficulties.
Okay, yes, I saw it was still on the zeros.
There now. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Okay, the item passes. There are 3 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Motney, Councilmember Becker, and Councilmember Lee.
Okay. Sounds good. We're now going to move on to item D, a consideration and action on approving two resolutions abating property taxes totaling approximately $5,204,592.57, including one, a resolution abating all or a portion of the taxes heretofore levied to pay debt service on certain obligation bonds on the city of Bloomington, and two, a resolution abating tax levy for rent payable and the lease agreement between the Public Building Commission, McLean County, and the city of Bloomington for the old Champion Building and the expansion of the parking garage as requested by the Finance Department. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason.
I'm going to pass to Scott.
City Manager, Council, Mayor, this item the changes that occurred related to the city levy has no impact upon the abatements. Abatements are really kind of a legal housekeeping related to the borrowing covenants that were included in the original bond issuances for our bonds. We do not levy for the entire debt service for all of our bonds. There's certain sales taxes that have been increased related to the arena bond and the BCPA improvements. And then we have a sewer related bond. It's part of another bond, but sewer fees cover that as well. So our abatements are just like I said, a legal housekeeping that needs to be approved by council. Our bond council reviews these. They're a little tricky. I go through them. It's been recorded with the county. So we start with a county report and then we match that with the debt service that's going to occur. And it's related to the debt payments in December 1st, 24 and June 1st to 25. So it spans a couple of years as well. And so we have our bond council review those. So anyway, next slide, please. I think I just covered most of this. City's bond ordinances secure issued debt with property tax revenue unless sufficient funds are available elsewhere to secure the debt. So it's included in the ordinances. This is security for the investors that purchase our bonds. The adoption of the proposed resolutions are required to abate property tax. So it releases us from that requirement for debt service and rental payments the city intends to pay from funding sources other than property tax revenue. And I mentioned the sales taxes and the fees. And then, we have the operating expenses, about the only thing left related to this building, but there's that old agreement. And so that needs abated as well. And as I mentioned, we have our bond council review these all resolutions and sign off of it. Next slide, please. So having given that very high level explanation as to why we need to do these abatements every year, I'd recommend that we approve the abatements in total of $5,204,592.57. Next slide, please. Any questions or comments or discussion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the tax
Second.
levy abatements as requested.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Monty. Who was the second? Was that Councilmember Bolin? Okay, Councilmember Bolin, sounds like. Okay. Okay, the item passes. No names to announce. I think you get to stick around, Scott. Just leave it here. Okay, so I think we're moving on to our finance director's report, and I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason if you have any introductory comments or.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just very briefly, December is a different month, so we're not far enough into it to have a complete financial reporting. But Scott's going to deliver finance director's report in a condensed form. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Actually, it's a completely different subject this evening. Actually, last year, we didn't have a finance director's report because of this issue with November not being closed. 2 years ago, we just covered some revenue, some details on revenues. This year, I thought I'd take the opportunity just to share some financial mechanics. We're doing a lot of discussion about taxes, so we thought we'd run through one of the tables that's in the budget book. It's a shortened version of it, and kind of talk through some of the tax components. Next slide, please. So there's a longer tax table than this, but this is included in our budget book, book number 1 on page 48. Gives me an opportunity to remind the community there's a lot of resources available that show the details on what impacts them related to purchases and the taxes they pay. So just, the first 4 categories are really primary, like retail sales tax. So you can see, I'm just going to highlight a couple of these. Retail general, so general merchandise. The base from the state applies a 6.25. That's made up 5%. The state keeps, the county gets 0.25%. The city, every municipality gets 1% of that 6.25. And then as a home rule municipality, we have a 2.5% home rule. So you can see our total tax is 8.75. And the total city of that 8.75 is the 1% from the state controlled and our 2.5% home rule. Retail, grocery, and prescriptions, they're different. They don't have the five for the state and the county, 1% for the city. You can't apply a home rule to that. So there's a 1% tax across the board, and all of that goes to the city. And then you can see cannabis, 5, the county had the ability to apply a 3.25 up to 3.25%, 1% to the city's home rule, and then we were able to apply a 3% occupation tax. So cannabis is at 14.75 with the city at 6.5. And so you can see the splits on the rest of these. Food and beverage, 10.75 total tax, 5.5 for the city. Packaged liquor, 12.75 total tax, 7.5% for the city. And then the local motor fuel tax, there's an asterisk down at the bottom, but the asterisk dropped off I hit a couple of columns here to simplify this. So the local motor fuel tax, not to be confused with the state share that we get that goes into our state motor fuel tax fund related to those large intersection projects. Some of them have been delayed for years. I'm looking at Councilmember Wolin here. So this is just a local motor fuel tax that goes into our asphalt and concrete fund. That's been holding relatively steady. And then a couple of notes, kind of circling back to home rule. The state does apply a 1.5% service fee to the city for collecting that for us. And then of our home rule, of that total 2.5%, 10% of that goes to asphalt and concrete, and 10% of that goes to the McLean County Health. So 20% of our home rule taxes go to other designations within the city as opposed to the general fund. Next slide, please. So peer comparisons. This is another table that's in the budget book. It's much more extensive. It includes property taxes, vehicle use, et cetera. But I thought I'd just highlight the tax categories that we went through on the previous slide. So I won't run through all of these, but you can see from a total sales tax standpoint, Bloomington and Normal are slightly below the rest of our peers. But you can run out to the right. You can see, that some of our peers don't have, Springfield doesn't have food and beverage, although it has a higher sales tax. They don't have a local motor fuel tax. But again, that 9.75% sales tax is probably, compensating for that difference. But this gives a community of where we kind of fall in related to our peers. And so, you can see that Bloomington and the town of Normal, we pretty much are in lockstep related to our tax rates. Typically, other than, the property tax, they're slightly, I can't remember now. I mean, I shouldn't say, I was going to say they're slightly below us, but I'm not sure now what this year's change. So next slide, please. And just to remind the community, I highlighted the section of our website. So if you go to the city's website and you go to departments, finance, annual budget, there are links to the FY24 budget books, the large volume 1 and volume 2, the budget in brief. And then it has all the finance director reports there as well. So a lot of information, those budget books, related to those tables that we just reviewed. If the community finds that of interest, what makes up that sales tax and who's keeping those revenue figures, they can glean a lot of information from those exhibits within our budget book. So a lot of resources online related to our financials. And next slide, please. I think that's it. And any questions or comments?
Questions for Scott?
I've got a question. I noticed that you put together the hotel motel / short-term rental into one category. I'm considering what Councilmember Montney said about short-term rentals and the concern that kind of arises from that. I mean, is there any possibility that those two can be separated and maybe, you know, consider adjusting those rates, considering one or the other? So just a thought.
Yeah, quick comment on that. I combine those on one line just to save space. They are separate ordinances, but they are at the same rate at the 6%. Yes.
I was just thinking maybe consider, you know, increasing the rate for one, considering the concerns over the short-term rentals. So just a thought. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any. So I'm gonna move to the city manager's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Going to kick this off with the slide video. Again, we're trying to highlight some of the events that are going on. Catherine, if you would, go ahead and hit that.
Get ready for a December to remember. On Saturday, December 16th, downtown Bloomington transforms into a holiday haven with Stocking Stuffer Saturday. Explore local shops for unique treasures and let the festive spirit guide your gift-giving journey. Also on the 16th, for those craving something a bit different, you can stop into Reality on Monroe for the Krampus Market hosted by the Painted Wraith. Embrace the unconventional, explore alternative gifts, and let your holiday spirit take a walk on the wild side. But that's not all. On December 23rd, head to Grosinger Motors Arena for the Holiday Farmers Market. Immerse yourself in the magic of the season, discovering fresh produce, handcrafted gifts, and festive treats. Mark your calendars, 3 unique events, 1 incredible month. Let's make this holiday season unforgettable. See you there.
Thank you, Catherine. Again, doing it this way, it's something that is able to be posted again so that we can push the events on social media. My slides, please. New hires. There we go. We have 4 new hires to the city. We have Caroline, marketing analyst with Parks and Rec. James has been hired as the superintendent of recreation, Parks and Rec. Alonzo is a city electrician with the water department. And Derek is a community enhancement inspector in ECD. Next slide. Just want to take the opportunity to tell the community happy holidays and looking forward to even more in 24. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, City Manager Gleason. And under my remarks, not much else to add. Just thank everyone for your patience with this process. It's been a while since I've been on Zoom doing this, so thanks again for your patience if it wasn't as smooth as you would have liked. And I also want to, wish everybody a happy holiday and look forward to a productive 2024. We do have a lot of work to get done. So, and I'm going to turn it over now to council members for discussion.
This is Donna, the mayor. I have 2 comments to make. We had our quarterly behavioral health coordinating council meeting last Friday. And it was announced that The county is no longer going to be funding the Bridge Academy, which sounds like bad news, but it's actually good news because they are self-sufficient, which means the county will have available funds to pay for other initiatives for mental health. So that was a success story. And for homeless situations, the county, using city tax dollars, sales tax dollars that Scott Rathman alluded to, has a fuse program for the homeless. There are trained counselors, professionals that actually will go out to the homeless camp and try to recruit them or convince them to go through the process to actually get into a living condition, a stable living condition. They also try to get them a job. So there are services out there for the homeless. They have to want to use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
This is Councilmember Lee. Just wanted to wish everyone Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. It's been a joy of a ride here. I've enjoyed meeting everyone and getting to know people. So yes, happy holidays.
I think that's all that you have, Mayor.
Is that all? Okay, well, thank you. No executive session, so at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, motion by Councilmember Bolin, second by Councilmember Becker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Happy holidays, everyone.